Max and Ruby was originally pitched to MTV, with a plot much more dissimilar to the product we have now. The early name for the series was Shining Ruby, and it followed the character of the same name, hiding the corpse of her nonverbal autistic younger brother in her home, before eventually snapping and revealing her true colors. All that was made for the series was a 5-minute pitch pilot by the name of Echadh, translated to one in Hebrew, and it was meant to show how the events of the series began. I know this because I was a test viewer for it, and I was tasked with giving my opinion on the idea alongside a group of other people. The projector turned on and the video started. The first thing I saw were lines of content giving the show's title, runtime, the test screening number, and the production code. A beep could be heard once the slide disappeared from the screen. A setting of a house, made entirely out of clay and wooden material, would fade into view, with the camera slowly floating around it. The background music consisted of weird, avant-garde sounds coming from groups of women. The sounds continued as the view faded into the house and other parts of it. It finally stopped once it reached a certain room of the house, where Max was sitting at a desk. Max could be seen with a desk lamp and train set in front of him. He was rolling them down the tracks, hitting other trains, pushing them out of bounds, and so forth. Suddenly, a clunking noise causes Max to snap out of his fun time and look down to the floor. The camera cut to his wind-up lobster toy, pushed up against his instep. He'd sigh and get up before picking up the toy and heading over to where his toy chest is. Before putting his toy away, he simply sits and stares at it for a moment, turning the lobster on its side to inspect it. Another moment of Max playing with his train set ensues, before the lobster crawls out of its confinement and bumps into his foot again. Max, annoyed, looks down and is about to take it back to the chest. A jump scare shot of the lobster with bulging fish eyes shows up on screen for a second, and Max yelps before jumping back in his chair, almost falling. A short GIF starts, with a shot of Max looking at the lobster, and then switching to a shot of the lobster looking at Max, and so forth. After about half a minute of the scene switches increasing in speed, it stops when the lobster turns around on its own and leaves the room. Max gets out of his chair and follows. Scenes change from Max walking through the hall upstairs to him making his way down to where the attic was. Downstairs, where the staircase's storage was, stood Max, next to his lobster toy, now repeatedly bumping into the small wooden door before slowing down to a halt. Max, confused, would assume that this toy was trying to make him open the door, prompting him to turn the knob. Inside were small toys strewn against the short walls and a dusty wooden floor, along with a single cardboard box. Max would walk inside and cough from the dust bunnies, waving his hand around to shoo them off, before looking down at the box. The lobster toy sat behind him, as he began to sweat from the forehead, slightly worried about the outcome. He then exhales before opening the box. A shot from inside the box showing Max opening its top would show up. After a few seconds of Max squinting and supposedly reading something he saw in the box, his confused face would slowly transform into a traumatized, ghastly expression, with the sound of a heartbeat pounding like a drum. Max would fumble around the bottom of the box, with sounds of flipping paper hinting to what Max found. Voices started to echo in Max's head, presumably from Ruby. They started off with simple scolds, and then they turned into screaming rants. Soon enough, Ruby's speech wasn't even intelligible anymore, now simply consisting of bloviated splutters. Finally, Max would talk, saying the one and only word he's ever spoken throughout the pilot. Doctor? Max would have trouble breathing, and the voices would get louder. He'd turn to his lobster and find that it didn't have fish eyes anymore. Its face was melting, mouth and eyes dripping with clumps of dark. Max would bawl and cry, making his way over to the stairs and knocking over his lobster toy in the process. He'd rush up the stairs as quickly as he could, but due to his lack of focus from how scared he was, he ended up slipping and falling. He would tumble down the steps, a few cracks being heard, before the inevitably landing on his head, smashing his lobster toy into pieces across the hardwood floor. The voices of Ruby and the heartbeat sounds would slow down to a stop, leaving Max's unconscious body on the ground. The final shot of Max's stiff carcass lasted 10 seconds, before the episode faded to black, and the credit slide came on. The overall reviews were mixed, with half of us liking the idea, while the other half thought it didn't make sense. Nevertheless, it was eventually scrapped. From what I've heard, they rejected the series because it didn't have enough humor, as MTV was pretty much well known for dark jokes, and not just dark shows overall. Only one person from the test screening that I kept in contact with bought a few cells and sent them back to me via email. But other than that, I don't have anything else from the pilot, as he was told the pilot was for internal usage. Kinda sucks, as we could have gotten a pretty interesting show if they let this outcome fly in. But hey, that's corporate decisions for you.